discussing an essay we just published, From Shakespeare to Move 37. It's an essay about creativity, inspired by a blog from Daisy Christodoulou from England. She's a professional from England, and she works in the education, grading, software type space. So she develops software that helps people grade English essays. Very interesting personality. I heard her at a podcast recently, and then I read some of her stuff. So in her essay, I think it's something like Shakespeare and creativity. She makes an argument that creativity is a social contract. The way we understand creativity, the way we perceive creativity, is actually reflects the zeitgeist. It's not a static thing. Creativity during Shakespeare's time, which is the Northern Renaissance, so 1500, almost 1600 kind of time frame. Creativity is considered something where you practice a lot and then you reproduce what you practiced in a skilled way. So something maybe akin to the 10,000 hours of Malcolm Gladwell. And then later on, a new form of creativity is formed, and that is the lonely genius sitting under a tree, having a spike idea, a flash of inspiration, and that is created during the Romantic time. I grew up in the German-speaking world, so that's very prevalent there with Goethe and Schiller. And Goethe is particularly famous for his escapades, to Italy and sitting under a tree and coming up with poetry that defines the times and maybe even humanity. And then we have another really good example, in my opinion, from the German world, which is Werner Heisenberg, who came up with the uncertainty principle. In my opinion, the most important philosophical achievement of the 20th century, the uncertainty principle, which really tells you that the world is not measurable, that we can't really measure the world to the precision that we think we can, and therefore, some questions remain that we haven't really answered until today. For example, what is the purpose of science if we can't really measure stuff? And the old saying, what gets measured gets done. Well, how can we do anything if we can't measure things? Now, the answer to that is, of course, we can measure most things to a precision that is good enough for us to build rockets and bridges and medicine and things like that. So that's fine. Anyway, so again, the genius, the sole genius, Werner Heisenberg walks on the dunes of Sylt, German island in the Northern Sea, and comes up with this phenomenal idea. Now, my point in this essay is that the zeitgeist does evolve, and our understanding of creativity evolves. And I think today we have a particularly interesting conversation because of artificial intelligence. In other words, today we are actually confronted with the concept of intelligence and creativity, even in a much more direct way, because the question now surfaces, we're building machines that are supposed to be creative. So then the question, of course, comes up, well, what is actually creativity? And I want to talk about this a little bit. This is not even on podcast. It's February 9, 2025. This is Krim Delco. We are down 10% for the year. The market's up 3%. We're outperforming by 13%. We had quite a drawdown on Tesla, driven by disappointing sales in Europe, declining sales in China. And our take on this is that there's definitely some political issues in Europe. In other words, the Europeans are being fed an enormous amount of propaganda in terms of Elon Musk and his involvement with Doge and Donald Trump. And I think that is hurting sales. But there's also the transition to Juniper, the Model Y refresh, which is having an impact, particularly in China. So I think it's a mixed bag, but I think overall very incredibly bullish on Tesla, particularly because autonomy is coming. And I think the robotic revolution that Tesla is going to unleash is massively underestimated by the market. So let's talk about this essay. So what is creativity, and how does our perception of creativity change over time? I think first I want to just point out Daisy's interesting comment that creativity is actually a social construct. I mean, that in itself, I think, is a really interesting perception. And I think sometimes you come across ideas that might seem like just little footnotes, but if you really think about it, it's a really interesting and important observation. So creativity is not some static thing. You know, the Romans, the Egyptians, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, the Romantic times, the Industrial Revolution, they all have their own version of creativity. It changes with time. It changes with the way, it changes with the zeitgeist. I think that's a really important and interesting observation that, in my opinion, it's new to me, and I wanted to point that out. Now, the question, of course, comes, okay, if that's the case, what is the zeitgeist today? What is our perception of creativity today, or how is that even being shaped? And my point in this essay is that we have, because of artificial intelligence, actually the conversation about creativity is really heated. Okay, we're asking ourselves, what is learning? What is creativity? What is, what does it mean to be creative? And because we're building machines that are hopefully one day going to be creative, I think this conversation is really getting to the next level. It's really sort of taking us to the next stage, if you will. Like the question, what is creativity, and how can we build creative machines? You know, there's a saying, I think it was David Deutsch who said it, but others also said it, that, you know, if I know how to program it, then I understand it, and if I don't understand it, I can't program it. So that, you know, that's it's not just for creativity, it's for intelligence in general. What's the relationship between intelligence and creativity? That's, I guess, for another podcast. I would say it at the margin, it's the same thing, because fundamentally, intelligence is supposed to help us solve problems. It's supposed to help us solve problems, find niches, find ways to compete for resources, find ways to pursue our goals, find ways to even formulate our goals and then pursue them. So those are all functions of creativity, which I would say is probably just a more general way, or a more specific way, actually, excuse me, a more specific way to talk about intelligence. So intelligence is maybe the more general way to talk about what sentient beings are doing, and creativity is the more specific way of how intelligence can be useful. The purpose of creativity is to develop a niche, to find a new niche in order to solve a problem. Whether it's move 37, which is the move that allowed AlphaGo Zero to win a game in a novel way, and novel from a human perspective. That means that humans, the experts of Go, considered the move 37 a mistake when it was done, and then it turns out that it was a genius move. So in that sense, that is creativity, that is novelty, and it helps solve problems, because in this case it helped win a game. There's the other example, for example, is Werner Heisenberg, the uncertainty principle. That is creativity in a sense that you think about something in a specific way, in a different way, and then you come up with a solution to a problem, and you change the world. In the case of Heisenberg, you formulate something that, in my opinion, has huge philosophical implications. So the canonical example of creativity, of course, is art, and I also mention in the essay an example from the art world. It's Picasso's Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, really beautifully depicted in the painting that shocked the world by Miles Unger. He writes, I've spoken about this book several times on this podcast, because it's a really nice introduction also to the concept of creative action, and it shows how Picasso is struggling and fighting, trying to restart a painting, then destroys the painting, restarts again. There's the concept of David Deutsch when he talks about the trash bin in the context of the question whether beauty is objective or subjective. He said, well, it's objective, because there is such a thing as objective beauty. And how do you know? Well, there's a trash bin. When Beethoven writes his, symphonies or piano concerts, he thinks about it. He doesn't like it. He restarts, and at some point, he's happy with it. What is that happiness? Now, that goalpost of when something is really good, is a function of the zeitgeist, and the goalpost of society deciding whether whatever the author did is good or bad and creative. That's also function of the zeitgeist. That's what Daisy is saying, and I think that's really an interesting observation. That's actually a really interesting revelation, because it says that creativity is it's in the eye of the beholder, and the beholder is driven by her zeitgeist and the times that she lives in. And Move 37 and artificial intelligence is shaping our zeitgeist today. So we're kind of shaped by the technologies that we develop, and of course the technologies themselves are also shaped by our understanding of creativity. So it's a flywheel. It's a sort of each other nurturing type process, which I think is fabulously interesting. Now, where does this all take us, right? What is the purpose of this whole essay, and why are we writing this, and what does this have to do with the Not Even Wrong podcast? For new listeners, the Not Even Wrong podcast series, the purpose of the podcast is to give people a sense for what it feels like to run a hedge fund. And we do a lot of things here. We write essays, we write blogs, we are in the process of writing a novel. So there's writing involved, there's reading involved, there's studying involved. We spend a lot of time at universities attending seminars, and we do some classes, some Coursera stuff. So there's a very broad plethora of knowledge that we consume, and we hopefully reproduce that. We put that through the funnel, and at the end there is a strategy, which is we buy or sell something, and that's supposed to make money. I mean, that's our business. That's what we do. If you want the analogy, photons in, controls out in the self-driving technology of Tesla. Well, with us, it's knowledge in and trading actions out. And this is part of it. This is part of the input, is us actually writing something and thinking about it, hopefully also conveying some new ideas, but most importantly, really thinking through the process of, in this case, creativity. What does it mean? And if you look at how AI systems are trained today, that I believe will have the most interesting sort of creative process that humanity will come up with. They're trained with unsupervised learning and knowledge, which is sort of the let's say the more old-fashioned way of AI. And then the more newer stuff is the reinforcement learning. And I think I'm citing Andrei Karpathy's blog there, and I think there's a lot of interesting talks. Also, Sergey Levin spoke about this, in how reinforcement learning is the tool that can help us with exploration, and exploration is really the fundamental tool of AI and creativity. So what is creativity really? It's purposeful exploration. That's what creativity is. And the reason I think machines will be much more creative than humans is simply because they can do more. And if you look at the neuroscience, actually it's very consistent, because what the neuroscience tells us is that we do a lot of thinking and processing in the subconscious. And what comes up and really turns into thoughts is sort of what the operating system, which is the cortex, the frontal cortex of our brain, what it allows to go through. And all the other stuff, we call it emotions and gut feeling. We can't really formulate it. We don't know what it exactly is, but it's knowledge. It's our nervous system is processing that information. And that's kind of akin to a reinforcement learning model, doing a lot of iterations, and then hopefully coming up with the best model. And then, of course, the reinforcement research community is still in the nascent phase, where we have the ideas, okay, do we want to do greedy search? Do we want to do random exploration? Do we want to do sort of Monte Carlo tree search type approaches, so where we have certain strategies, but then we jump to other branches of the Monte Carlo tree to change the strategy? It's always about exploration versus exploitation, and and that's really what creativity is. Now, as a summary, I want to say the reason we are so uh, excited about what's coming with autonomy is this concept of creativity. Actually, creativity is at the core of our investment thesis because we believe that we can have creative machines and they can come up with really new ideas and create a lot more niches and solve a lot more problems, and therefore increase productivity, increase the human condition, increase the level of the human condition, make money, create wealth, increase the potential transformation humans can do, which is really what wealth is, according to David Deutsch, which is something we agree with. So all of these things are positive, and I think this essay hopefully can support that thesis and help us formulate a little bit more, give us a little bit more granular understanding of what we mean when we talk about autonomy and its potential. It's the potential for creativity driven by the possibility of massive iteration in combination with massive knowledge and generating new solutions to problems. Thank you.